Ever since Monster Legends added the ability for monsters to go past their max level by ranking up via the Monster Lab, the resources required have been different, and the ways to acquire them different as well. Today, I'll go through each different way these rank up materials have been acquired, and how the new way to rank up Metropolitan monsters stacks up. Since I can't go and record my own footage for these dungeons, since most of them don't exist anymore, I'm going to need to rely on old footage. So thank you for Aura4 for the Mythic Amber dungeon gameplay, X Gameplay Monster Legends for the Infinite Gauntlet gameplay, and Armor Gaming for the Titan dungeon gameplay. And the rank up survival dungeon gameplay is my own. For commons, uncommons, rares, epics, and legendaries, you rank them up using either element cells, which can only be used on the monsters of that element, or Elementium, which can be used on any monster rarity mentioned previously. You can get element cells from either chests that give a specific amount of a random element, or by extracting monsters you already have. Elementium, on the other hand, is only really available in the Elementium dungeon, but it only gives you 9 in total, so it's not worth using your precious stamina on, considering legendaries aren't exactly usable in the current meta. For original Mythic monsters, you can't use element cells or Elementium to rank them up. You have to use Mythic Amber. The only way you could get Amber is through the Mythic Amber dungeon, which was a dungeon with 6 levels. The first level required only a single Mythic monster to access and complete, second needed 2, third needed 3, and level 4, 5, and 6 required 3 Mythics at rank 3, 4, and 5 respectively. The amount was alright, but not amazing. It gave you enough to rank up the mythics you want to rank, but didn't give enough so that everyone got rank 3 mythics just by using the dungeon. The dungeon did require stamina, so you had to think about if you wanted to get Amber or other rewards from dungeons. The dungeon did reset daily, as it didn't save your progress. This made it so players could farm Amber daily, so dedicated players got Amber every day. Overall, the Mythic Amber dungeon was a pretty fair way to obtain Amber, requiring stamina but resetting daily and giving a fair amount. The next generation to come along after the original Mythics were Cosmic Monsters, and along with them came 2 ways to obtain their rank up resource, Stardust. The first way was a dungeon identical with the Mythic Amber dungeon, just requiring Cosmics and rewarding Stardust. The other way to obtain it was via a dungeon named the Infinite Gauntlet. This was a survival dungeon, meaning monsters don't recover health and stamina after a battle like other dungeons. When monsters die, you can't use them unless you pay 10 gems or wait for the gauntlet to reset the next day, and requiring no stamina to use. The only way you could recover your monster's health and stamina is either passing a checkpoint or by using monsters or relics that had healing/stamina recovering moves. Unlike other dungeons, to get far in the Infinite Gauntlet, you really had to use strategy to bypass the layered nodes, especially when they updated to add cosmic monsters to the enemy lineup. Monsters with the Essence Relic slot really shined, as when they died, they came back thanks to Uriels, and Uriels can be used more than once on different nodes. Now, the best way to take out extremely high-level cosmics is by using bait, which are monsters that are sent out to die just so that the enemy monster will eventually run out of stamina, so that when you send in your main team, the fastest enemy monster will be forced to recharge. You also had to use relics that drain stamina when hit, because you'd run out of bait eventually. Overall, the Infinite Gauntlet was a very well done way to obtain Stardust, and the rewards were very good, but required you to go far in the dungeon to get those rewards. The Gauntlet really encouraged strategy, and this really made the Infinite Gauntlet a hit with Monster Legends players. Oh, and the Stardust dungeon was just there for some extra Stardust if you needed it. After the end of the Cosmic Era came the Corrupted Era, where Ludum was added as the new rank-up resource. Just like the last era, there were 2 ways to get Ludum. One was through the Ludum dungeon, which offered barely anything. No one ever used it, unless they needed like 5 Ludum for a rank up. The other and more rewarding way was to do the Titan dungeon, which was only around Friday to Sunday. How it worked is that you faced off against one of 3 Titans, which were invincible. The whole point being that the more rounds you survived, the more Ludum you got. As previously mentioned, there were 3 Titans: Artifact, Uncontrollable, and Pierce. Since each Titan had a different trait, you had to approach them differently. You couldn't just use the same strategy against all of them. At the start of the era, there were 10 rounds, and if you survived, you got 450 Ludum. Then, for some reason, they extended it to 15 rounds, and the max Ludum you could get was 400. Either way, the fact that it was only available on weekends made it so you got a lot less Ludum compared to Stardust with the Infinite Gauntlet. And also, unlike the Infinite Gauntlet, there wasn't much strategy involved with lasting the whole 15 rounds. For Artifact and Uncontrollable, using Taunt DA would completely confuse the AI, as they would just throw AoE attacks over and over to no effect. For the Pierce Titan, just bring Deniers in your set. Bonus points if they have True Vision. Overall, I personally didn't enjoy the Titan dungeon nearly as much as the Infinite Gauntlet. There wasn't much strategy at all, the fact that it was only available 3 days every week, and how the rewards were much more scarce than they used to be in the last era made for a rank up resource that I found fine enough, but not as good as the one from the past. Oh, and the Ludum dungeon was terrible. And this brings us to the newest way to obtain rank up material, with the rank up survival dungeon. Similar to the Infinite Gauntlet, it's a survival dungeon, but that's where the similarities end. There's no checkpoints to refill your health, it's a lot shorter, and the rewards are very different. Instead of just giving Nebula, it gives random cells of a monster you used in battle. The higher the node, the higher the cells. You do get Nebula at nodes 5, 10, 15, and 20, but it's mostly cells. Which means that if you really like a monster, and you want to rank it up, you can just use them in the dungeon every day, since progress does reset daily. The only other special thing about this dungeon is that on one node, you don't just fight one team of monsters, you fight multiple waves. This definitely makes it harder than if you just fought one wave. But what makes this dungeon great is the immense rewards. You gain so much cells, without even getting that far. Overall, the rank up survival dungeon is a dungeon that requires some strategy due to the waves, but offers immense amount of cells even if you don't complete it. And those are all the unique dungeons that have been added and removed to obtain rank up material. Overall, my favorite is the rank up survival dungeon. The Amber dungeon wasn't very fun and was pretty boring. The Infinite Gauntlet's later nodes were very hard. Or I'm just bad. Probably that. And unless you got very far, the rewards weren't that great. And Titan Dungeon being only available on weekends already makes it worse than the others. And it was also somewhat boring, at least for me. The rank up survival dungeon is pretty easy, resets daily, and has amazing rewards. I am glad that every era has a different dungeon instead of the same one every time. It'd get pretty boring if every era had the same old dungeon every time. Oh, and the Ludum dungeon is still in the game somehow.